All right, yeah, that's Eve on. Eve echoes in the background. I know. I always wanted to play Eve online, but I didn't have the patience for it or the time because I was playing World of Warcraft anyway. So uh, it's just a bunch of flying around in space. I don't know. It's kind of boring actually, but I could get into it. What that's why it's going right now because I need to make 37 jumps. So anyway, so there's been a lull. I missed a day of recording I wanted to do, but it was kind of busy yesterday. So I'm going to finish up the controls and then I'm going to skip debugging. I think maybe I'll make a video or two. I think I'll make, if I make them though, I'll make them after. Well, they come after anyway. Anyway, I need to like talk about the forms thing because that'll help you on your lab. So we'll talk about that soon too. But I just don't want to knock out radio buttons. Um, I've already used them. I've shown like, I don't want to say sophisticated, but fairly sophisticated uses of them already beyond what the book's been doing. So, um, I just want to cover them in general. And I forgot to do this. Hold on, let me pause. Okay, so this is the Wikipedia picture to demonstrate this. This is where radio buttons come from. I'm old enough to remember this because we had, let's see, I was a kid in the 70s, so we had some cars still that had these. Monte Carlo 72, 67 Mustang, both had this kind of thing. So they're called radio buttons because you used to pre-select stations in your car. You can sort of see it now, but we have these like digital toggle buttons now. But the way you would do it is you would dial to the right station, then you would pick one of these. The FM, ignore the FM part. I don't know why I even says that on. It's kind of confusing, but usually they would just all be the same buttons. I want to say 5 or 6, and there might have been a variable amount, but anyway, you would dial the bar to the station you want to tune in. Once you got it right, you would pull the button all the way out. You would, not all the way out. You don't want to break it, but you'd pull it out until it kind of clicked, and then you would push it all the way in. What it would do is there's like a little cable inside. It would grab it, the cable that moves the tuner. It would grab it somehow, and you would make it to where that button, when you press that button, it would dial it to that same spot for you. So the thing about them though is that when you picked the station and pushed it in, it would be pushed in, if I remember right. Sometimes they would pop back. I'm trying to remember actually how it all worked. But the thing is, you couldn't do two at the same time. So if one was pushed in and you pushed a different one in, the one that was pushed in would pop out. So the term for that is kind of behavior is mutually exclusive. Like one thing excludes the other and the other thing excludes you, and back and forth you exclude each other. If the one thing's true, the other one thing has to be false, and vice versa. So for radio buttons, the way you see that work is that radio buttons will be in a group on your form. Let's pull it up, and only one of them can be selected at a time. Now they can start unselected, both of them. I've set Mr. to be true here. You could also do it in the form load. You could say Mr. button dot checked equals true on the form load. However you want to do it. It's probably better really to do it here. But if one's true, the other one can't be true. What'll happen actually, let's try to see what happens. If you make both of these true, what's going to happen is it'll make the first one, whichever loads first, will be true for a split second. And then the other one will be unselected. So let's actually see what happens when we run it. Are you running? No, you're not. So Mr. was true. Maybe I'm lying here because I said Ms. I've got it selected to. Do I have checked? I'm not seeing. Oh, I don't have checked. I was looking at something else. Never mind. So yeah. So there's an order these things load in, and see, so it's got the second one clicked now because the first one can't be clicked. I guess it's whichever, the latest one in order is going to be the one that takes precedence. So just so you know how all this works, the key thing that you realize though is only one can be checked at a time. That's what a radio button is. So the way I've just made this is another silly example. There's only two choices, Mr. and Ms. Right? We're not going to presume marital state. So Chris Nicholson, and if I pick Mr. submit, Ms. Submit. Look at the code. It looks like this. This is a good example to review this. I know you guys have had this before. I should have comments here, but this is the it's the ternary operator is one thing it's called, because it's an operator that has 3 operands, 1, 2, 3. If this thing's true, this one happens. If this thing's false, this one happens, right? So it's not even really bothering with what the checked state of Ms is. It just presumes that, and why can I do this? It's only because I have 2 things. If I had 3 buttons, only one in the group could be checked. So you'd have to do like, you know, like an if else or switch or something, or you could iterate over all the radio buttons, and whichever one's the checked one is the one that would do something. There's all kinds of ways you can handle it. So radio buttons have a checked property. Let's see, they have a, you can also make it to where, let's look at the radio buttons. If you double click on this, you'll notice this is the default event. So the state of it changing either from checked to not checked or not checked to checked can fire off an event. So for example, usually the way you would do this is you want to do the check change, but you only want to sense that it changes, and then you only want to do something if it's checked. Now, that's not a law, but that's usually the way people use that. So you could say if radio, because radio Mr. is the one I did, right? So RDO Mr. and RDO is the traditional, if I remember correctly, right? If checked, message box dot show. This is just for example. You are a Mr. All right. Remember, not checked, right? Because that's either true or false. You don't have to say, in other words, it's redundant to do this. So don't do it. It doesn't hurt anything really, but you don't want to do it. So if I click it, there you go. You are Mr. Notice that when it'll also fire off the changed event when I do that, because it'll go from being checked to unchecked. But because of the if statement, it won't do that message. So again, if you take the if statement out, you'll see it'll lie to us sometimes. Now, if I do this, and this is not the only way you would handle these radio buttons, but see, it does it both times now because it changed its state from true to false or false to true. Check to check, unchecked, unchecked to check. Now, one other thing to talk about, and this will introduce the last thing, I think the last control, is this. Let's say, okay, you've got that, and let's say, what else do we want? I need a scenario, guys. Give me an idea for a scenario. A person that has, let's do 3, maybe. Let's say, I don't know, like favorite color or something. This is horrible as an example, but you get the idea. RDO red. I'm always doing colors of radio buttons for some reason. Like if you look at the previous video where I used radio buttons, I do something with colors there, I think. Let's do green. Let's do RGB. So RDO blue. And just change these to match. This is just the text properties. This is what shows up, just like everything else. What the user sees is usually in the text property. That's the way you should think about the text property. I think I've got these matching. I have to double check maybe, but I'm not going to worry about it right now. So let's say they're going to put what their title is and then like maybe their favorite color. Let's make red the default. So we'll do that by just going clicking on red, making sure it's selected. Also, don't forget you can always do this in the GroupBoxes here. Going to checked and making sure it's true. And then run the program just to show an example. Let's say, okay, now here's what you should notice right away. The last thing that loaded in the series that could have been checked true or not was the radio button that's red. So Notice that Mr's not. What happens when I click Mr? It still has that message box. I never got rid of it, but right. If I click Mr here, I get the message box, and then I click blue. So what's the problem here? The problem is that you can only have one radio button checked at a time. And why does this happen this way? It's because by default, if you put radio buttons on the form, your radio buttons will be in what's known as a radio button group, and only one of the radio buttons in that group can be selected at a time. But you can segregate them out into different groups. And the most common way to do this is to add something called a group box to your form. And this could be kind of touchy sometimes, so you have to make sure you do this correctly. It's not a, well, hold on, let me undo that because I lost my grip on it somehow. Here we go. Where is the grip? It's right there. Yeah, where do you even grab this thing? No, right. So what you want to make sure you do is that you place the radio buttons that belong to a certain group into the group. Now make sure it's inside of this and not like somehow on the form beneath, right? If you actually pick up the group and move it and they move with it, then you know you got it right. There's other ways you could do it to be more exact about it, but I just usually just place them on top of the group box and it works fine. And so at this point it will work because these are in the form group box. There's container. Just think of a group box as a container that contain, you can put things on the group box instead of the form itself. But these buttons are all in the form group. And let's see. The check is still true here. Oh, it's not for Mr. Let's check it. And now these things can be checked independently. Technically, I think it's more elegant to actually create, if you've got one group box at all, you should have one for each group of buttons. So, and then you would name them. You don't necessarily need to name them in this case. When you name group boxes, you want to name them according to what they, it would be GRP title, right? And then GRP color. So if you did name them something like that, you can sometimes leave this empty if it doesn't matter to you, or you could, like, if you wanted to use that text property to actually show. I don't think you might want to have more control. There's probably a way to control where this appears in the group box as well, but I usually just leave it out, honestly. But let's run it and see what it looks like. So you see that message box thing should still be in there. I haven't got rid of it yet, but and we don't do anything in the code with these yet, but you can see that they can be clicked independently of these. And of course, you might want to be, a little bit more designer oriented about how this I'm not very good at graphic design and knowing where to put things. It'd take me forever to get this perfect, so I'm not expecting you to be totally perfect with it either. But gosh, 13 minutes already. There's one other thing I might talk about. You're going on hold for a second. Okay, I wanted to say that there might be a class called a radio button group or a button group or something like that. I think that might be Java interfering in my brain. They are very closely related languages. So it would be an actual class that you add radio buttons to in your code instead of just adding them onto other objects from your toolbox. But it looks like I couldn't find that, so I didn't look very hard. But this is all you need anyway. Now, keep in mind, group boxes are not explicitly just for radio buttons. They're just to group anything, but they serve to make radio buttons work the way you want them to if you use a group box. You could also use a panel. Don't ask me the difference between a panel and a group box. There's a slight difference, but a panel is another container, kind of a plain container. Notice it doesn't have a name or a text property by default. Does it have one at all? Looks like it doesn't. You could have used this as well. to group the buttons on instead of a group box. But group box was talked about in your book, so I decided to make that the point of the video. That covers all the different controls. So this is where I was. I was like 15 minutes away from getting rid of that chapter the other day. I think, is that the last thing in this chapter? It's not the last thing in this chapter because it's the last thing in this section, though. I'm going to talk about forms next. Creating your own forms and launching them and dialog result and all that. That's next. Yeah, that's next. So stand by for that, and that'll help you a lot with your lab. And then debugging, maybe we'll go over debugging. I have to decide, but it won't be. It might not be today if I do it. I'll definitely get the form stuff done now. See you soon.